Join us now on the Cambodia and Vietnam Explorer from the 9th to the 22nd of February 2016. First night we had a meeting in the hotel to tell everybody what was going on, and then the next morning it was an early start for a cyclo ride through the back streets and markets of the city and past buildings which showed evidence of the rich French colonial past. It was just fun on this, but I managed to have a blowout on the bike I was at, but luckily our guide Martin Cook took pity on me and gave me his taxi. We finished up at the Royal Palace. The sheer grandeur of these places never ceases to amaze me when you look at the poverty of the people living outside the walls and the sheer luxury inside. The buildings though were magnificent. We went past this huge mural and then onto the Silver Pagoda.
And then we renovated again in 1969. So now the whole building made of concrete and all pillars.
The golden Buddha is encrusted with some 9,000 diamonds. We then went to the National Museum where we got an appreciation of the Khmer history, and they had some 5,000, I believe it was, sculptures or pieces in the museum. We couldn't photograph inside, but I managed to get a little bit of film on the outside of the building. Magnificent looking building in the Angkor type colours, just beautiful. I left a bit of sound in to give you an appreciation of what it was like at the Central Market. Bustling, busy, but the market itself was not open. We were on the outside parts of the market because it had been the Chinese New Year holiday, so we couldn't actually see anything inside. We're now at the Tol Sleng Museum of Genocidal Crimes. Quite a chilling sort of a place. An old school that was converted to hold prisoners and torture people. Not a very nice place at all, but either really was the killing field. It's an interesting experience, but quite an emotional sort of place. Especially where they actually had bins around the place to put clothes in that were washed up when it rained, and you also had places to put bones that were washed up when it rained, so not very pleasant. The Children's Hospital was just around the corner from our hotel. Yes, it's this time of the morning. We're in Siem Reap and we're about to leave for Angkor Wat. And here we are, it's pitch black on our way out. We have to get our tickets on the way, then walk through the jungle in the morning to the back of Angkor Wat, around to the front to watch the sunrise. The outside now of the main building, and as we look inside we have the longest stretch of bas-relief carvings in the world. Just unbelievable. Angkor Wat has several layers, and you can venture quite deep into some of the central chambers of the place. It was interesting. On our way in, we saw this monkey up on the steps, but nobody had any idea it was about to come down and grab the food off one of the people there. Of course, the fact was you weren't supposed to take food in there anyway. Magnificent place, but totally void of trees or any real sign of life, if you like. These steps were amazing. They were old steps and now closed to the public. There was a new set on the other side, but we didn't get to venture up to that level. I'm quite pleased we didn't, really. And out through the front, and this was a guardhouse or temple or whatever in the grounds, and then the outer wall of the complex, and then over the moat which went all the way round the temple to our breakfast meeting. After we finished breakfast, it was on to the west gate of the walled city, Angkor Thom. It held something like 1 million odd people. Interesting main gates here, and then we came in and our first sight of the Bayon Temple. Magnificent place with huge heads sculpted into the stone. And you'll see here as we move in a bit closer exactly what they look like. They're just unbelievable, and all these bas-relief carvings around the place. This one of people rowing, all different activities. This was also on a variety of levels. I had meant to take photos of the steps going up to the other levels. They were pretty steep and pretty hard to get around, but we made it. And then back to the hotel for a short break before we were about to hit the road yet again. This time we're on the way to the Banteay Sri Temple. Just a small temple, but they have really great carvings within this small structure. It was rather pleasant. It was a nice spot, and even though it was small, it still had a moat around it, and we thought it'd just make an absolutely perfect holiday home. You know, you wouldn't be troubled by the neighbours' dogs or anything. We stopped at a local village that made palm sugar, and then on to La Prom, which is the Tomb Raider temple, which was enveloped by the forests. It was smaller than I expected, but a rather beautiful place. And of course, like everywhere else, lots of people, but it's a good job we weren't there in high season. This was interesting. You can see I've put the picture of the carving that's actually in that wall behind, carved into the tree. Just a lovely place. And even as you come out through the main gates, it's very pleasant. Today we have a late flight to Saigon, so we've taken an optional extra and gone out the Tom Sap Lake. In the lake the water level rises and falls with the seasons, but it's getting lower all the time now because of Chinese dams upstream. The floating villages and the stilt houses accommodate all these changing water levels. It's just an interesting and fascinating place. We saw fish farms, ducks, and even a pig on one. Well, it was Saturday, so the kid's not at school, even though he is playing with a snake. These little boats are used to carry everything. This one was some concrete pipes, or sections thereof. All sorts of floating villages. Interesting place See what people live in. But it's not at all 19th century. A lot of the buildings have solar panels on them, they have power, electric lights, etc. Quite amazing. And here's the local greengrocer delivering goods. Kids start out pretty young, and this little girl is paddling quite a reasonable sized boat, but you can see that the lake's not very deep. I thought this was an interesting and fascinating place though, the way people lived. Here you can see this woman, she's obviously cooking stuff for the woman who's in the boat, and after she finishes cooking she sort of then cleans up, and you can see here she's putting out the fire and the other girl's cleaning up behind her. Interesting way of life. This boat we actually, or this home we actually ran into with the boat because we got a snag in our motor and the guy had to lift it up and clean out the bit of rag. Fascinating trip. It's a restaurant, people leaving the restaurant and then climbing yet another set of stairs up to the buildings, and here you can see stilt houses on the way back. The water level is obviously very low here because they're on dry land now. Lots of stalls on the way back to town, and around the corner from the hotel we even had this tut-tut waiting to move into the night market for the Made in Cambodia market. Hotel again, and of course luckily around the corner from the hotel we had a cake shop that sold coffee. Great find. Well, we're now in Saigon and we've ventured out to the Coochie tunnels. What was probably the most fascinating part about this was the demonstration.
So the size of the tunnel, 35 centimeters. If we say inches would be 10-15 inches. And he put the camouflage on, and you see the tunnel lid made of wood, and the edge of the tunnel entrance made of wood as well. So when it gets wet, it swell, cause some suction. No water could go into the tunnel, but could be leaking a little bit, and the tunnel could be damp or humid. All right. So when you go in,
Hey, that looked easy.
where's that lead?
That's a little mistake.
You're silly or talking
The man traps looked a little bit nasty. What the guy didn't say is they also put poison on the spikes. Nasty stuff. We had fur for lunch and then on to the War Remnants Museum. Had a good display there, great display of weapons and machinery, etc. I didn't particularly enjoy the Agent Orange area very much, but at least you could move along at your own pace there, and it was well worthwhile. And then on to a walk of the city area, and this was the post office. Rather impressive sort of building. It was built by the guy that built the Eiffel Tower, so a rather impressive place, and large and very active. It's where the scooter was invented for the local people, but in fact they have a two-child policy there, and if you work for the government and you have more than 2 children, you lose your job. But in fact a motorcycle or a scooter can carry 4 people, 2 adults and 2 kids. This is where we went for our evening dinner at a barbecue place. It was really nice. Had a lovely evening. This was a happy stop on the way to the Mekong Delta. What was of particular interest here was the lotus plants. It's interesting because they actually grow these in large numbers. They use the seeds to eat, and or the pods itself to eat, and they actually even use the leaves to wrap food in for cooking, etc. Very useful plant. On the way to the Mekong, we stopped at this temple, which was a combination religion of a whole heap of things, such as Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and so it goes on. An interesting place. And we arrive at the Mekong. The Mekong's a huge river, starts up in the Himalayas or somewhere, it comes right down through China, a few other countries. It's huge, it goes for thousands of kilometres, and here we're right near the mouth, and on the way we go to visit a brick factory. This is a really interesting place. The beehive type structures that they actually use as kilns start off as a square, several bricks thick, I think about 12 bricks thick, and then they go up and they go into a dome at the top. Then they got all these sheds around the place that are used for drying out the bricks when they make them, and then these in fact are just the rice husks, and the rice husks are actually used in the fires to fire the kilns. They actually have a chimney at the back of the kiln, so the draft goes through underneath, and you can see here they get incredibly hot as the air goes through, goes up, and it heats the entire area, and the centre of the dome has a hole in the centre that lets the hot air out the top. This would be an interesting job cleaning that out. Then we're back on the Mekong, and it's great. That was a house where people lived, and now we're at a coconut processing plant.
It takes about 6 months from the fresh one to the old one. So a day one professional man can take about 1,800 coconuts. Seed inside. This here, this one. So we know that inside we have a seed. This one is seed, and we get the baby tree coming. The baby tree coming.
Next stop is a mat weaving family, and I was impressed at the speed at which they did this. Most amazing thing is they got something like about $5 a mat. Something stupid. They were on a tut-tut on the way to lunch. For lunch, it was elephant ear fish. Well, let's just say it was different.
Slightly fibrous, bit like lobster.
Oh yes, thank you.
After lunch we moved down to a little jetty, and from there we boarded small boats to move on.
Life jackets under the seats.
No toilets on board.
Có kéo lên trời từng con mấy cái nó xô ra vậy.
An interesting trip down a small canal, with locals working on the way. And then we reach our next boat, which will take us back to our bus. Many of the houses on the riverbank now include large areas of iron. The traditional thatch roof is actually better and provides more insulation in hot weather, but has the big disadvantage of providing a home for insects as well as rats and mice and things like this. Lots of motorbikes and scooters on the way to the airport, and a huge scooter or motorbike car park at the airport. And then on to Way. First stop to the tomb of the former emperor. The grounds here were huge and covered a large area. We then watched a woman making joss sticks and here using cinnamon and stuff.
And then we need something sticky like glue. So we had a resin. Look.
We had a great lunch and even a cake for Fiona's birthday. We stopped off at the Spiral Foundation and met the deaf and mute workers, and they made us a small gift each. And from there on to the Citadel. Most of the Citadel was destroyed during the Tet Offensive in 1968, but it's being restored. Everyone was quite fascinated by the huge number of koi that were gathering around the walkway. Just amazing.
Here.
As we left the Citadel, you could see the French influence and even where trenches were during the war. When we left the Citadel, we went to the Tinmu Pagoda, and what was interesting here is that they had a lot of bonsais, which were actually Australian native plants. This pagoda was actually situated near the banks of the Perfume River, just a nice spot, very tranquil and quiet. Now we're on the road again. Today we're heading off over the Haivan Pass, and we're not actually in the air, we're taking a bus, and now we're at the top of the pass where the French and American bunkers were. It was very, very cold. We arrive in Hoi An and go for a walking tour of the city. I like these old push bikes made out of bamboos, they were great. And then to the Japanese covered bridge, which was interesting, and a walk on the inside of the bridge. Down to the water's edge to watch a guy dropping or lowering and raising fishing nets. Interesting technique, pretty time intensive. Hoi An was a real shopping town. This was the market area with just everything on sale. But we particularly liked it down in the areas that weren't all spruced up, if you like, down on the edge of the river, some of the older areas, and there were buildings down along the edge that hadn't been renovated, which were just great. This tuk-tuk is moving a whole tree. It was a bustling area down there on the water's edge. Just a great assortment. These sculptures or carvings were from bamboo roots, and then everything on sale in the markets. Fish, prawns, crabs, bits of decoration there, various crockery, etc. Everything. And then back to the hotel at night for just a nice coloured lights in the driveway. A flight from Da Nang to Haiphong, and then a bus from there to Halong Bay, and we're on our boat and we're heading out into the waters to spend the night on board. Halong Bay consists of over 3,000 islands that rise out of the sea. Very popular spot, and here we're going to the caves, which are up on the side of one of the hills, or mountains if you want to call it that. Beautiful caves, just well done with lots of colour and light inside. Well, after a day of touring, we head back to our junk and then to get organised for dinner tonight, and then sleep on board. An early start this morning, and today they tell us we're going to climb a mountain. But I think I might stay down the bottom and watch everybody else. It was actually interesting with all these inlets, and here on the actual island where the mountain was, they actually had sand on the beach. Ellen climbed most of the way up and took a few photos for me from up there, so at least I could see what it looked like. After the mountain, it was just head on back to our berth again and catch the bus, and we're on the way now back, and happy stop on the way. And this was interesting, the guy with his pigs on the back of his scooter. 4-hour trip, we arrive in Hanoi, settle in at the hotel, and then off to a restaurant for dinner which had a beautiful view over the lake. Just a lovely spot. We had just about been overcome by food, so we decided to just have a bowl of soup and then go for a walk when we were waiting for the water puppets to start. And we went round the back streets of the old quarter. It was just an interesting walk. And now we're off to the water puppets. Quite amazing, with lots of different characters and little acts. It was just great. And now we're off to the Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum. Changing of the guard here. But then because I thought it was just interesting. The lake around which he walked, the house that he lived in whilst he ruled Vietnam, and then on to the one pillar pagoda. Hanoi's central prison was always known as the Hanoi Hilton. It's where they imprisoned the leaders of the various national liberation movements. We then moved on to the Temple of Literature. Spent a little bit of time looking at the lake there and moving around through the bustling crowds. And now we head off for a walk through the bustling old quarter, 36 ancient streets, where we just see what goes on a daily basis. It's just everything, interesting old French buildings, all sorts of things. It's a fascinating area. In most towns and cities, blocks of land are only 4 metres wide, on rare occasions 6 metres, and houses tend to be 3 or more stories high. Walking along the streets is a challenge, as is crossing the streets anywhere in Vietnam. A view of the city from the top of our hotel. It was a nice hotel, the last one. It's good it was saved to last, to appreciate it. And then our final dinner. And thanks for watching.